Welcome to the Prepped and Polished podcast, the podcast that empowers you to take control of your education. Featuring weekly interviews with influencers in the world of education, as well as tutoring tips, lessons, and updates. And now, here's your host, Alexis Avila.
Hi everyone, welcome to another Tutoring Tips, Grammar Tips episode of the Prepped and Polished podcast. It's your host, Alexis Avila of Prepped and Polished. Please be sure to check out our website, www.preppedandpolished.com, for more info. And on our website, be sure to sign up for our free SAT ebook. It's called 13 SAT Tips You Cannot Live Without. And anytime during the podcast, after the podcast, you can submit a question during the show or after the show. radio@preppedandpolished.com. We love hearing from you. Let's get right to it. So in versus into. In and into are two prepositions, and students often misuse them, but their meanings are quite similar, but each has its own specific usage. So the simplest way to break it down is to think about what is happening in a sentence. So if the preposition you need refers to the position of something, then in is the correct word to use. Position, use in. If you need a preposition referring to the direction of movement of something, then into is more appropriate. So for example, the boss asked her employee to step into her office, direction of motion. Another example, the papers we had been searching for were in her office all along, position. Mr. Jacobson trudged into the swamp, direction of motion. Mr. Jacobson was in the swamp when the alligator swam by, position. So, 4 examples for you. So there are cases in which in is part of a phrasal verb, and therefore in space to is the proper construction. The test for a phrasal verb, though, is to check if the verb has the same meaning with or without the preposition. So to break is different from to break in. So break in is its own phrasal verb construction. And even if this verb involves motion, not position, in is part of the verb. So for this reason, into is inappropriate. So for example, Melissa broke in space to the apartment through the window. Or here's another example. Jason asked to be let in space to the basement through the back door. So when considering which of these options to use, a simple checklist can be used. So is the preposition in part of a phrasal verb that alters the meaning of the verb? If so, use in space to. If not, is the preposition indicating the motionless position of something? If so, use in. And then if not, into is likely the best preposition to use. You can confirm this by assessing if it correctly indicates direction of motion. So just to recap, use, for the most part, if you're referring to position of something, use in, direction of movement of something, use into, and there's some exceptions along the way. So this wraps up our show. It's episode 79, Grammar Tips, episode in versus into. Please join us for episode 80. It's our next guest episode with teen coach Tammy Walsh of Teen Wisdom. To access all of our podcast episodes, go to www.preppedandpolished.com/podcast. Thanks for joining us on the Prepped and Polished podcast. Now go out there and take control of your education.
You've been listening to the Prepped and Polished podcast. For more information, check out preppedandpolished.com. Also, you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Thanks for listening. Class dismissed.